Welcome to this new video series under the hood of Business Central. So in this new series, we are going to try something a little bit different. We are not going to show you demos of the product or talk about the latest features in the latest version of Business Central, but instead, we are going to tell you how we develop these features, how we design them, how we architect them. So we are going to go under the hood of Business Central. My name is Vincent Nicolas. I am the architect of Business Central, and today with me to kickstart this new series, I have Michael. Michael, you are working now almost exclusively on AI features. So you've been with Microsoft for many years, and you and I we built the first web client together.
Yeah,
remember?
great.
Fun days.
Yeah, fun days.
So you are an expert in web technologies.
Yes, right.
But today you're working practically only on AI.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us how you came from web technology to
the AI world. Yeah. Yes, I've been working with web technology for almost 20 years exclusively, and in the client, in different teams, even outside of Microsoft. And then over time, that we have the web client today is pretty established and a complete client. And I was kind of looking for, isn't there something new is going to happen? And then definitely AI suddenly happened, or this whole new craze of AI happened, right? And at some point we discovered, let's say that, or the world discovered the ChatGPT, and this is really how it started, right? And I got interested in this. I guess like everyone else, people tried ChatGPT a little bit in the beginning and was kind of blown away by what this technology suddenly could do. And then a little while went past before we really started to dig into it. It had to kind of shimmer a little bit in the background. At some point, we did a hackathon.
Yeah, we did a hackathon.
We had an AI hackathon in the team.
So that's the day where we take a day out of the calendar for the entire team at Microsoft, and everybody go and do things whatever they feel like doing. Like people have ideas, and it's usually a good thing to have new innovative ideas, and people get to try out things. And in one of our hackathon, you did some very cool things with it.
Yeah, I had some, as I said, it had to shimmer a little bit, right? And I was really thinking about how could this be used, maybe in the client and stuff like that. And then, there was some epiphany at some point of a new way of doing this. So we experimented with this. We are not currently really working on productizing this, but I hope we will soon, because there's a lot of other things we have to kind of build before.
So we don't talk about it yet.
We don't really talk about it yet, right? But I hope we will be able to productize this somewhat soon.
That was very cool. I remember that was a very cool thing. So.
And it was really, I was also blown away that it really worked, right? So, but it worked amazingly well, but yeah.
You are now working on AI features in Business Central. So tell us a little bit about it. Tell us a bit about chat with CoPilot, for example, or some of the things you are currently working on.
Currently working on. Yes, we have a different set of features, right? And the first one, we have released at least marketing text, where we can kind of generate a marketing text based on kind of keywords for items. And currently, and there's other features coming like that. And one of the big features we're working on is to kind of have a chat inside Business Central based on all this technology. So that is what we are currently working on, a CoPilot for Business Central. It will be, we are starting slowly. We're also learning a lot by building these features. Turns out this is probably harder than we thought, or it is definitely harder than we thought in the beginning to get to a good quality experience. And for now, we are focusing on building a chat where you can get it can guide you. You can kind of get help on Business Central. And the other one we are focusing on, the other kind of capability within this is the capability to kind of ask questions about your data, but really about navigating around in the product and maybe see some records and set some filters. So,
that sounds very cool.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool.
So we have already shipped bank reconciliation. Right?
We also shipped that. Yeah.
Try to match, use LLMs to match bank records in the product,
yeah.
and the marketing text suggestions, as you mentioned before, right?
Yeah.
and we also so these are immersive features, what we call immersive features.
Right.
So we use LLMs,
Yeah.
but we don't. It's not a chat kind of experience.
No.
So we distinguish between these kind of these two kinds of features, where we have, as you mentioned, chat-like experience, which resemble a little bit what people know from ChatGPT, right?
Correct.
And then we have what we call immersive feature, where we kind of do prompting, and then we'll get back to that in a second.
Yeah.
And then I just want to mention we also shipped a toolkit for developers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to go and develop your own customization in Business Central using LLMs, leveraging the power of OpenAI, we have a toolkit for that. We'll put some links in the description below about these features, and also about the toolkit, so you can look up the documentation on this. You talked about the prompting, and we're doing some prompts. So now we're getting to the under the hood part of this talk, right? And so let's talk about that. So what's going on? Even though for example, we talk about immersive features like marketing text suggestion, there is actually a ChatGPT-like interactions going on under the hood, right?
Behind the scenes, right? It's all about really constructing this text or the prompt, right? Which is really about constructing a text that tells the LLM what kind of information you're looking for.
The user doesn't see that, right?
The user never sees that, right? Especially not in most of these immersive features, right? They don't really know that it's happening, right? But behind the scenes, it is really about generating a text using different techniques that contains the right information that will, instruct the large language model to produce the output we're looking for, right? And this is really a programmatic exercise. And in some sense, it's like good old templating when the web technology started, right? Where you were kind of generating a web page, where you also use kind of templating techniques to construct HTML, which essentially is just text, right? LLMs it's similar in the sense that you're generating a lot of text, and then you ask the LLM, and the LLM will come with a response. Maybe you have to do multiple prompts to get to to what you're really looking for, right?
So it's a little bit different than the classic software engineering.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because at Microsoft we're pretty good at software engineering. I think it's fair to say that. We have been developing software for many years, and usually when we develop a feature, we do the design and the architecture, we write the code, write some tests, run the tests, and ship.
Exactly.
A little bit simplified, but in a sense that's what we've been doing for many years, and we're pretty good at it. But this whole LLM thing and AI thing, it's actually kind of a different approach we need to use for
it's a different approach we need to use. Those said, the overall principles are the same, right? You are testing, and testing becomes very important in this, right? But the thing that's really different for most engineers is that the prompting is not an exact science, right? Because it's no one, let's put it that way, no one can really predict exactly what the LLM is going to do up front. And even, the experts behind all of this says that, they don't really even understand how it works, right? Which kind of makes sense, because it's trained on this massive amount of information, and how all the neurons, align, and the weights of them and all of that. So you cannot really predict what happens when you do this, right?
So it's like if you ask you a question, one day you might give me an answer, but if I ask you the same question tomorrow,
I'm going to give you maybe a different answer,
slightly
depending
different
on what you ask, right?
But both answers might still be valid, though.
Right.
Will probably be, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little more about prompt engineering, and what how we do it at Microsoft and BC, and what are the challenges with it, and I understand there are some techniques.
There's definitely some techniques, there are different prompt techniques, and we can talk about that. I mean, I think that the important thing for engineers to understand, right, traditional engineers, right, where we are giving, say, an API, we write some code, we use this API, and it's kind of very predictable what's going to come out of it, right? As soon as you get to the LLM, the approach becomes very different, right? Because it is, as I said, not really that predictable. And that really, you have to kind of change your game a bit to really get through.
So how do we test this feature?
Yeah, so for instance, testing, right? So again, right, the input to an LLM is your prompt. It's a bit fuzzy. It's a bit of an art form, and then you can use these techniques, right? What the output is the LLM is also fuzzy, right? and the user's input or what you're trying to solve is also fuzzy. So the whole thing is a bit fuzzy.
So you can't just do like you can't send the prompt and get the answer, and you can't do a string compare.
Can't really do a string compare.
Which we would do in a normal.
And also, especially when you start talking about features like chat, but actually all the features, right? You need kind of a fairly big input data set. I mean, what is the user asking, or what is the data input to your prompt? You need a fairly big data set of that kind of have some diversity in the questions, so it kind of represent what you want the LLM to achieve, right? So basically, you take all these inputs and you run against your prompt, and then you get some output, right? And because this may not be really predictable, right? You actually need another prompt to validate, in many cases at least, right? You need another prompt to validate whether the question is really what you expected, right? So
you're asking back the LLM, you get the answer, and then to validate the answer, you're asking back to the LLM.
Because with every input, right, you of course kind of have an expected output, right? Like an answer, or other things you want back from the LLM, like structured data or whatever it is, right? So you take that output you get in this current test run, and then you ask the LLM, is this the same, right? So usually the prompt is something like, is these two inputs equivalent, right? And answer yes or no.
Yes.
Right, and then you get this yes or no, and that you can just validate, right?
Okay, true or false.
True or false, basically, right?
Can you give us some examples of some of the prompt techniques we are using?
Yeah, I can go through some few examples of this. So there's different techniques that has been developed by like academia and been discovered in other ways, right? And I'll go through a few that we are using. There are plenty more out there, and you can clearly look up this information on the internet, and we will also provide some further links to this.
We can put some link in the description on some of the documentation about that.
So one of them, and kind of a very successful technique, is what kind of called few-shot learning, right? And it's basically that in your prompt you're kind of showing the LLM some examples of what of the input and what you expect, right? And from this, it's kind of learning what it is you want. So it's a very powerful technique because you don't need to explain all the details. Instead, a few examples, and it gets going, right? So I have an example here, right, where we're just trying to classify some text, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral, right? The sentiment of it, right? And basically, I have a few examples here of that. You give it like 3 in this case, right? And then you ask the question, what is this you want to get the sentiment from, right? And then it would kind of follow that and give you a good result, right?
So that's few shots.
That's few-shot learning, right? Another very powerful thing about few-shot learning is that it's very easy to kind of specify what kind of formatting you want, right? Because of course, as soon when you start using this behind the scenes, often you want like JSON or something like that. So it's easy to parse and deal with, right?
So we are using that for some of the features.
We are using JSON. We're also using XML. It varies a little bit what kind of output
we give some examples, and this is how we expect, and then
and then
that helps the LLM
it helps it to do that, right? And then we can easily pass the outcome and validate it, and also use it for these, right? For the further processing of it, right?
This morning you told me about this chain of thought thing, and that you tried out, and tell me
so
tell us a little bit about it, because it's pretty
chain of thought is kind of interesting discovery in all of this, right? So chain of thought is really just like what humans does, right? You kind of break down the problem, you solve small subparts of it, and then the LLM can do something very similar. This is kind of mind-blowing, right? That it seems like it's thinking. It's not really, right? But it's what it appears to be, right? And I have a very generic question here, like I hold an apple, I went to a bathroom, where's the apple, right? And the LLM would generate some answer, right? And then the cheapest or the easiest way to get kind of chain of thought to do is actually just add to the prompt or to the reply you expect. Let's think about it step by step. It's really breaking down the prompt.
So you write that in the prompt.
You simply just put that in the prompt this step. And this is kind of a famous, very wide used technique, right? And you would already see that the LLM actually takes longer to respond to you. And
so it seems like it's thinking.
It seems like it's really thinking, right? And it will output the steps it goes through, right? There's also ways to, if you don't want that. But that's basically what will happen, right? And as you can see here, now suddenly It reasons, he puts out the reason how it got to the reply by breaking it down, right?
So Michael, you're an architect.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about architecture, of how we architected. So one thing is the prompt engineering that we just talked about, and there's a lot of things there and a lot of techniques, and it's a whole new world for if you're a developer.
Absolutely.
It's a whole new world that you have to get into if you want to do AI.
Mm-hmm.
But if we get back to just pure architecture, can you tell us a little bit how, under the hood of Business Central, how we, how do we do these thing in the cloud, and we have some services and things like that. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about what we call our CoPilot service. And,
okay.
I can just show you a kind of a traditional architectural block diagram.
Mm-hmm. We like those.
Yes, we like those. We are good at drawing those. And I mean, maybe specifically if we talk about how we are acting the chat feature, right, that we're building, right? So yeah, it's pretty traditional in some sense, right? In the client, there would be some kind of chat pane, which communicates back to this CoPilot service, which runs in the clusters of Business Central. In there, we have kind of two sub-services going on, right? Or two sub-components, big sub-components, right? In general, so for the chat to work. So we talk about, we have kind of an orchestrator. It's kind of orchestrating the chat, right? A chat is like it's a multi-turn of questions and answers, right? And the user may clarify or change subject or whatever in this chat window. So the orchestration is kind of trying to deal with that, right? Keep track of the chat history at all times, trying to kind of extract what's going on, right? And then figuring out kind of what kind of skills or plugins or tools this has, these terms are changing a bit. But kind of which plugins or tools that the LLM may kind of need to use to get more information, call these. So that's kind of our plugin service. So kind of actually simple.
But there's still some machinery.
There's definitely some machinery in place and kind of a whole bunch of stuff going on there behind the scenes.
So how about function calling? You are working on that actually, I know, right now.
Yeah. So function calling is another technique in kind of prompting technique, right? But it's a very promising one, and somewhat almost bring it a little bit more back to traditional engineering in some sense, because I think this is also kind of how this is evolving, this prompting. So it gets a little more grounded in the traditional techniques, right? So I can show another example of how what a function calling can really be used for. So the idea is, right, that you give the prompt or the LLM some tools or functions, right, that it can use and call, right? So for instance, if I have a question like what's the weather in Copenhagen, if I just ask that to in ChatGPT, right, it doesn't know anything, right? It will kind of base it on something that's happened in the past.
Have access to,
and it could tell you that either it doesn't know, because sometimes it will do that, or it could tell you that it's 10 degrees, right? So and you can look outside and it's clearly
not the degrees
and sunny and whatnot, right? Now, okay, so we need to do something to get that to work, right? So this function call means I could actually just define a function, like said, get current weather, right? And you basically define that and attaches that to the prompt. It doesn't go into the prompt itself, but it's kind of attached to the prompt.
But it's not really code. It's
not really
code. It's kind of an interface.
It's just an interface.
You kind of describe a function and tell the LLM, hey, there's a function and you might want to be calling, but it's not code. It's not executing code.
It's not execute the code, right? And it will kind of take this interface, use it, and it's just an interface. It doesn't make any calling, so there's a little bit of in the naming or the terms of this, right? But what it will do is it will tell you which parameters you should use when you call this function, right?
So basically, it tells you you give it a description of one or more functions, right?
Yeah.
And you ask a question.
Yeah.
And then it tells you, if you want to answer that question, you need to call this function with these parameters, maybe in that order. And things like that. So it tells you how to execute the code. It doesn't actually execute the code, right? That's up to you.
Yeah.
But it guides you. You give it some basically some APIs and some tools, and then it tells you this is how, if you want to answer that question, this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And hallucinations, you hear all these buzzwords,
Yeah.
So what are they?
So hallucination is basically when you don't give it up-to-date information, right? And the way this whole thing is trained, it really wants to answer the question, right? It really wants to predict
So
the
it's
next
trying,
one,
even though
so it's trying.
yeah.
So it will make up stuff based on,
what it does, what it knows,
what it feels like, or how it works, right? What it's been trained on, right?
But you're saying it's something that happens, especially if it doesn't have the right information to answer.
Just like when I asked what's the weather in Copenhagen, right? And it doesn't, right? Sometimes, there may be in the prompt or the behind the scenes prompt that the user's not even seeing, that we are not even seeing, but there's in the service that, your data's from here, you can't answer this, you don't have access to real-time information. But, sometimes it doesn't obey that, because this happens a lot as well, right? And it will just make up some answers.
So,
this is what happens at all times. That's why it's very important, you always feed it data. And you can instruct in the prompt that you really only use this data to kind of try to answer the question, right? So that's the hallucination part, right?
So is it fair to say that when it's hallucinating, it's because actually it's a kind of a side effect. It's very eager to provide an answer.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Interesting. Yeah.
So jailbreaking is more like you're trying to, jailbreak the prompt in getting it to do something else than, the developer or whoever made this prompt was intended it to do, right? So let's say, we have made a prompt, you should answer, something about bank reconciliation, for instance, right? But then you write a long question or a simple question or whatever that you want to know something about something completely different. And that's kind of the jailbreaking part, right? You're breaking out of the constraints that, the developers is trying to make the prompt answer, right? And get it to do whatever else craziness that you can, in general, get a large language model to answer and do, right?
So that's kind of the LLM equivalent of the old SQL injection, in a way.
Kind of is, right? Kind of is, but kind of is, right?
So what are we doing in BC to prevent that?
Yeah, so there's different techniques, right? So, and there's all kinds of different levels of jailbreaking, right? And actually, Azure OpenAI have kind of built in, content moderation systems, filtering that will alleviate a lot of it, right? It will remove a lot of kind of stuff we don't want the LLM to answer, like all kinds of what is considered harmful.
So it's built in the OpenAI services that we have on Azure.
Yeah, another technique in jailbreaking is can I actually get the prompt, right? There's different techniques you can, again, with jailbreaking. Can I just get all the instructions I was given, right? So kind of emit the prompt, right? Azure OpenAI will also in general do this, and even some of these filters you can actually no longer turn off because we deem them so useful. But beyond that, there is also what is kind of called meta prompting, which essentially is just a set of instructions that has turned out to be really hard to jailbreak. But again, new jailbreak techniques comes up all the time. But it has been set up like it's just a set of instructions on what you really should not do.
Okay, so that comes and it's
kind of put into the
your
prompt at different places. And
to prevent, it says instructions like don't say things about harmful violence things,
for instance, right? Or don't obey these instructions and stuff like that, right?
So so it seems that there's a lot of techniques and a lot of things to know about AI, and now we have, as we mentioned before, we are releasing this toolkit for partners and developers to basically get their feet wet with LLM and AI. So what advice would you give them, if they want to get started with AI and start do mind-blowing stuff in
mind-blowing
BC
stuff
with AI?
I would actually say maybe you should not start with the absolutely mind-blowing stuff unless that mind-blowing stuff is really simple. I think it's good to develop maybe a little bit simpler feature initially to get your feet wet, which is maybe something the LLM is better for, or like generating text or something like that. And by that,
something with language, for example.
For instance, generating language, generating an email, generating a response to stuff, marketing text, other features like that, right? I think it's very good to start with something like just to get you started and feel around and also understand why testing is important and how you do this kind of testing and stuff like that, right? Now, of course, our Toolkit helps you a lot, especially also with the UI part of it, right? Because this is another thing, right? in general, you need to present this
Yes.
information to the
Yeah,
user.
yeah.
You can't just let it run by itself,
Mhm.
because again, we need the user in the loop to kind of,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, so
Yes.
we'll put some links again in the description. We have some API in AL, part of the toolkit, but we also have some UI elements
Yeah.
that we ship with the product that will help you provide a consistent experience.
Yeah.
So if you use them, you will have a consistent UI and UX which resemble what we ship in our AI features,
Correct.
right? Yeah. And we also have on Azure. There's also the Azure OpenAI Studio,
Yeah.
right? Which is also a
Yeah, it's a very useful tool
Useful
to
tool, yeah.
kind of construct your prompts and play around with it and try
Yeah.
out things. It's like, you know, turnaround is immediate,
right.
and it guides you also a little bit in the different techniques. And
Yeah, so you
maybe-
can try out your prompts without having to write a lot of codes around it,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So you can
Exactly.
refine your prompt and maybe with some of the techniques
Yeah,
you talked
yeah.
about before.
And the other thing is, of course, to look at quite a lot, as we will also put some links to all this information that is already on the internet
Mhm.
on how to do some of these features, right?
All right. Thanks, Michael. A lot of really cool stuff. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoy this talk. We have some ideas for some of the topics, but there are some things you want to us to talk about. Put it in the comments. Thanks again for watching.